Ladies and gentlemen, be welcome to the next episode of my Safe Bet Show. In this episode, I shall be talking to Cait DeBaun, Vice President, Strategic Communications and Responsibility at the American Gaming Association, and we shall cover all things responsible gambling with a particular focus on the ongoing Responsible Gambling Education Month. Cait has done such a phenomenal job within and for the gambling industry that it struck me that she had a different career before having joined the industry. You actually started at Ogilvy Public Relations, where you led numerous social change focus projects and efforts. And then you moved on to working on a project called Project Time Off, and that was a national advocacy campaign on behalf of the US Travel Association. So here comes the question. A lot of folks out there believe and would argue that our industry, the gambling industry, is somewhat different or special based on your experience with this industry and the other industries. Would you agree? Are we a special industry?
That's a great question. I didn't know quite what I was getting into when I joined the AGA, the American Gaming Association. But what I've learned is that this is a very unique industry. It's highly regulated at the state and federal level here in the U.S. And, that comes with a lot of nuance that a lot of industries don't have to deal with. It's very competitive. It's interesting with a membership-based organization when you're trying to drive consensus, how to get there and find the issues that we can kind of move ahead because of that. It's also both nascent and mature. The retail industry, the brick and mortar casinos have been around for decades, whereas online gaming, sports betting is very new, and we're still navigating that future. So it's definitely been interesting to learn those kind of curves and nuances about the industry. And, I think what's most interesting to me, or kind of the fun thing that I've learned, is the footprint of U.S. gaming. So we're in 44 states, 989 casinos or thereabouts, and countless communities, and learning the stories of what the industry has done to impact those communities. I remember one of my first events was for Responsible Gaming Education Week back in 2019, and we had a florist who was working with one of the local casinos, and she was telling the story about what the casino coming to their community meant. Or there was a kind of cleaner there who had worked on the construction site and then got the contract for the casino and now has 30 employees. And so I don't think there's a broad appreciation for what our industry does, and learning that has been a really rewarding experience.
And you've definitely been together, of course, with the AGA at the forefront of at least trying to change that perception, because I've been in this industry, albeit mainly on the online and sports betting side of things, for 13 years. And just like you, I can't think of any other industry that I'd like to join. I think it would be too painful to leave the industry, especially right now. But perhaps if you were to pick up one fact that you would consider the most mind-boggling and most bizarre one about the industry, it may be an unfair question, but if there was one thing that would left you completely dumbfounded in connection with the industry, what would that be?
That's a hard one, and it's a good question. I mean, I think it's interesting. It's not maybe a specific fact, but that casinos are also banks. I think a lot of people don't appreciate the amount of kind of money and security that goes into a casino. We all have, I think we all think of Ocean's 11 when we think of those types of things, but it's Ocean's 11 times 989 casinos across the country and the different ways they do that. It's, I think, really interesting and evolving, especially with payments modernization.
I would even go as far as arguing that casinos are many more things than just banks, of course.
Of course,
with restaurants and shows and all that. But that's a great point to call out. And perhaps if I may move on to talking about the American Gaming Association, and perhaps set the record straight that you guys do not necessarily focus on Ocean's 11-like schemes. Though I do believe perhaps Ocean's 13 or the 7 by now, the Magnificent 7. Anyway, I would believe that, it would be rather foolish to think that anybody who would come across this podcast would have never heard about the famous AGA, the American Gaming Association. But for those arguably very, very few, would you mind telling the audience a little more about the organization itself, what the mission is, and perhaps without trying to put you on spot, going back to your point about, I'm not saying conflicted interests, but the broad variety of interests of your guys being a broad church. How do you go about accommodating all those interests? I'm sure that everybody would love to hear more about that.
Sure. So the AGA is about 25 years old, and we're here in Washington, DC, and our mission is to foster a policy and business environment where legal, regulated gaming thrives. Our members are wide-ranging, so we have commercial and tribal members, we have operators ranging from the large resorts and big names to smaller casinos that are more regional. We have suppliers, so those who make the products that go into casinos and fuel the back end of the industry, technologies, payment providers. It's a wide range, and that means that, when we're working to advance our issues, there's a lot of consensus building that goes into that, and we're picking the issues that we know are going to make a difference to the broadest remit of our membership. Specifically, we're looking, we rolled out a new strategic plan earlier this year. It's looking at the next 3 years and our goals around that. And, one, creating an environment for growth and momentum. So that's cultivating champions here in Washington, DC. The reason the AGA exists is to build a voice in Washington and advance our policy priorities here in DC. That's, shutting down the illegal market, a huge effort for us right now, and going after offshore operators and unregulated illegal machine manufacturers here in the U.S., and to bolster the industry's reputation. We're the first line of defense and setting the record straight and advancing that conversation about how the industry is responsible in our communities. It's, driving effective and efficient regulation, and then bolstering our industry's commitment to responsible leadership, which is a huge part of my job.
Oh, absolutely. And it's truly appreciated by the industry. Going back to the critical point you made in connection with the black market, you've already touched upon certain ways how that could be addressed. So what would you think is the recipe for stamping out the black market? I suppose I'll try to avoid naming any names, but sadly, at least still relatively recently, even the big US papers, the New York Timeses of this world, they would still have given time and space to the Bovardas of this world, which in my view is, at the very least, and putting it very mildly, rather misleading from the consumer perspective. So is it about educating the folks outside of the industry, and what else in your view needs to be done in that respect?
Sure, there's a number of things at play. One is consumer education. So making sure that, we're helping people understand legal options, and that comes from advertising. It's a huge reason why the industry invests in advertising, is to help people differentiate between legal and illegal operators. It's, educating the ecosystem broadly. So we send near daily emails to media outlets in the US who haven't figured out the legal operators from the illegal operators. And sometimes it's as confounding as flagging to some of these media outlets, hey, did you know you have a relationship with this legal sportsbook and you should use their odds instead of, this nefarious actor? And then, a big push that we've been focusing on this year is around, getting law enforcement action with the Department of Justice. Earlier this year, AGA's CEO, Bill Miller, sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland to, raise the ante here, making sure that all levels of law enforcement, federal, state, local, understand that they have a role to play in stamping out the illegal market. And, that's not going to happen overnight. The legal market is only 3.5, 4 years old at this point, going on 5. And, we've seen the growth. We have, lots of research that shows Americans are migrating and they understand, 9 in 10 sports bettors believe they should bet with legal operators. And so we're winning the fight, but it's a long war against them.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Yeah, it's shaping up to be a long-term battle, but I would totally agree with your statement to the fact that as an industry, again being spearheaded by your organization, we've started winning the fight. And also this is a perfect segue into my next question and the next segment of this podcast, which revolves around, well, sports betting for starters, and then if we may, we'll also move on to online casino. But let's stick to sports betting for now, because at the risk of stating the very obvious, it has taken the US market, or the market, I believe it would be misleading to say, or to call it the US market. So let's say the US as a country by storm. Actually today, for the record, is the 8th of September, so we're only hours away from the kickoff of the next football season, Bills v Rams. Let's see how that one pans out. The big one, of course. Oh, from today onwards, actually, there's a very fair chance that our screens will once again be flooded with a lot of sports betting adverts and $5,000 risk-free bets and all that jazz. So, in your view, is this a strategy or an approach that would be sustainable in the long run? And I totally appreciate that a lot of operators lately will come on to that. They've really had a strategic rethink, and perhaps those allegedly multiple $1,000 free bets won't feature as prominently. But anyway, the volume of advertising, do you think that this is sustainable in the long run?
I mean, I don't think we're going to see the same level of advertising, as this market matures. It's only 4 years old, really. And so, and if you, in earnest, you would probably say that last year's NFL season was, the first true legal sports betting season with the mass growth of the market between 2018 and into 2021. So that's the starting point. This is a nascent market, and we need to drive awareness of our product and of the legal market, just like any other industry. Part of that is then it's new. So people are like, what's this new thing I'm hearing about? I see it all the time now. I'm sure we all have it was crypto earlier this year. Many years ago, it was .coms. There's always going to be something that is picking up attention because it's new. And then there's seasonality to it. There's going to be spikes. I imagine the next couple months, there's going to be more sports betting advertising. We can all understand and appreciate that. Or March Madness, or when a new market goes live. We'll see a few markets go live this year, with Ohio towards the end of the calendar year. Maryland is working towards mobile launch. And there's, Massachusetts is out there. So those markets are going to see an increase because, our operators are going in to win their customer share. But I will say, we have done this in a way that is proactive. So out of the gate, the AGA and our membership came together to create the Responsible Marketing Code for Sports Wagering and set a standard for what advertising looks like in a responsible landscape. And that's not targeting underage or other populations. It's the mandating inclusion of, RG and PG resources. And we're continuing to evaluate that and grow with it. But I'd also say that it's not just up to the industry here. There's a lot of players in this space that are new, leagues, broadcasters, and they all have a responsibility here. And, for example, like truly brass tacks, each league and broadcaster sets the standard for how many ads are on their airwaves. So I think, everyone has a role to play here, and we'll see some rationalization, and we've already seen it throughout the last season.
I totally believe that this is indeed the critical point. Yeah, the onus is on the industry, but not just on the industry, because you've already answered my next question, which was going to be an unfair leading question. So I take it you would agree with me saying that the industry does need to take foot off the pedal a little bit, focus on more sustainable advertising. For those who wouldn't have come across it yet, I believe today or yesterday, DraftKings launched their new responsible gambling campaign with The Miz and Tony Hawk, and I believe that's definitely the way to go. But as you've just pointed out, and I would subscribe to that as well, yeah, there are others in this space who have the liability for making sure that advertising is sustainable and reasonable and responsible going forward, especially the broadcasters, perhaps cynically speaking. And that would be my take on it for what it's worth. The broadcasters, they're always quite good at gauging the public mood, and I can imagine that not in the new states, to your other point, but in the states that have regulated some time ago, I can imagine that populace might be getting rather fed up with all those adverts on, or sports betting adverts on TV.
We do tracking around kind of public perception, and it's pretty steady. It went up last year and has continued kind of at that rate. But most Americans are seeing, or more Americans, I should say, are seeing RG advertising. So I think we're, appreciating that, as we advertise for our business, we also have to advertise about responsibility and creating a sustainable marketplace. Our research shows that 56% of Americans recall RG advertising in the last year, and that's an increase from 22% in 2 years. So I believe that we've been proactive about this from the beginning, and we're continuing to invest in the right places. The DraftKings ad I was particularly excited about because I showed it to my stepdad, and I was like, now you can understand what I do. He's a big wrestling fan. I was like, this is how, this is, part of the partnership I have. And I think that's part of it. We're collaborating more and more, and that is paying off in how Americans and our customers and policymakers see us.
I should definitely show the advert to my mum. For the record, she's not a wrestling fan, but for the last 13 years, she's really struggled to figure out what I actually do, perhaps. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that advert will help hammer that home. And before we move on to talking about a couple of projects that are, without any shadow of doubt, very close to your heart, I have a game plan, and well, we're right in the thick of it, the Responsible Gambling Education Month. Perhaps one final regulatory question, if I may, and I believe it's rather pertinent. We've talked about the sports betting bonanza, that avalanche of regulation up and down the nation. That's one thing. Well, on the other hand, online casino, or as they started calling it in Ontario, iGaming, that's been rather a slow burner. So would you have any views as to why that may be, those 30 plus states to have regulated sports betting? And I believe the count is 7 or 8 for online casino and poker.
Yeah, it's been an interesting thing because, I started at the AGA in 2019 and have seen the two growth trajectories, and they're not parallel. But interestingly, the revenue and the tax created from that revenue is parallel. And so there's more opportunity in iGaming for states in terms of tax revenue. And I think part of it is, iGaming is less familiar. Sports betting, Americans have been doing that for a very long time, regardless of whether there's a legal market or not. And so people understand that. They know, everyone watches sports, presumably most people, perhaps not everyone. And so it's more of an education to understand what the opportunity is there, and why that's a place to advance legalization in each state. That said, it's up to each state to decide what's right for their constituents and what their legal market looks like. And I would say that as we think about where future growth comes from in the iGaming space, we should be thoughtful about sports betting, because I think a lot of policymakers are going to be looking to see how that all shakes out in terms of advertising and problem gambling and all of those and other kind of compliance issues before they greenlight any additional legalization in the online space. So I believe part of it is getting this opportunity right with legal sports betting before there's further pursuance of other legalization.
I'm actually looking from my window at the Empire State Building. I believe that the next year's New York State legislative session might be the perfect litmus test for the future of online casino in this country. And indeed, as you've pointed out, of course, with the notable exception of my wife, most people watch sports. With the season coming up, I'll have to start hiding and find a few minutes to watch a couple of games. But brushing that aside, of course, when you play sports, you need to have a game plan, and the same goes for betting. When you bet, you do need to have a game plan, and if I may call it that, to have a game plan program, a very well respected one that the AGA has launched, is, I believe, one of your babies, one of your brainchilds. So you have been leading on that charge. So again, for those arguably few who wouldn't have ever come across it. Would you mind calling out the key features of the program, the objectives, and even more importantly, the partners included from within the world of sports?
Have a Game Plan is something that Casey Clark and I here at the AGA worked to develop in late 2019 as a means to kind of level up what the industry is already doing on consumer education and industry perception. So each operator, each supplier has their own responsible gaming program, and we wanted to create a platform by which we were bringing operators, suppliers, and the industry to the table, as well as sports leagues, teams, media, anyone who has a vested interest in sports betting. So it's a very flexible campaign. Have a Game Plan, bet responsibly. Some of our partners, like NASCAR or the New York Jets, they've opted to do, know when to pit or know when to lay up for the PGA Tour. So we had a few customizations of it, and that was intentional. All of our partners know their audience the best. We are here to provide a platform to talk about responsible gaming and provide that expertise. So since 2019, we've built the campaign to more than 30 partners. Entain, BetMGM are part of our campaign and great partners in advancing the message. And we've seen that continued growth. We're excited to have some new league announcements hopefully later this year and see where we can break through with media. Because, as we've talked about throughout this conversation, and I know, Martin, you kind of firmly believe in, is responsibility isn't just up to the gaming industry. There's an ecosystem here that we're working together to advance this conversation and have a game plan as one means of doing that. And we made it simple. We talk about, customers should set a budget and stick to it, keep it social, know the odds, keep it legal, play with trusted licensed operators. So, we're trying to reach new customers around this message by activating on the platforms that already exist among our partners.
And indeed, thanks for giving us the opportunity. Yeah, one of the many proud partners to have engaged with the program. And to your other point, it's also great to see that the major leagues and the like have jumped on the bandwagon, because I would suggest that what we need in this space are ambassadors. That's why at our end we've been working with the likes of Charles Oakley, because a few people may be listening to me, more people, with all due respect, will be listening to you, but if you got the likes of Charles or Amani Tuma, then, everybody's hanging on their lips, and they have definitely bought into all the tenets behind responsible gambling. Yeah. So if the folks get to hear it from them, then the message really reverberates. In a similar vein, coming hand in hand on the back of the Have a Game Plan program, we are, as I've already said, we're going through the Responsible Gambling Education Month. It's no longer just a Responsible Gambling Education Week. This is the first time the US industry is having a whole dedicated month. So could you walk us through the thinking behind the metamorphosis or evolution from having a week to having a month, and what triggered that very welcome and laudable change?
Yeah, so Responsible Gaming Education Week was created by the AGA back in the 1990s, and was the goal of the week has remained the same. It's to educate consumers and employees on responsible gaming practices, and to elevate, the work that we do day in and day out to create a responsible environment for our players. This expansion is reflective of the growth of the industry and our commitment to responsible gaming. So last year, it was still a week, and at the end of the week, I think I had done something like 7 webinars and 5 business days, and everybody was just, really invested in this time to talk about responsible gaming. And we got the feedback from our membership that, why isn't it a month? Why aren't we taking the opportunity to talk about this over an extended period of time? So expanding it to a month reflects our growing commitment, but also allows everyone the opportunity to, engage more and advance the conversation. So we're excited to see all the great activation. We're only a weekend right now, and I imagine by the time this airs, there'll be a full month of, great content and announcements and investments in this space that we should all be proud of. And it's, while it's only a month, it is something that is reflective of our, year and the priority we place on responsible gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any highlights on this year's agenda you'd like to call out for the audience?
Yeah, so we, decided to, when we expanded it to a month, wanted to provide some, themes so people could arrange the work and activations they're doing in kind of a organized way. So our first week was about empowering customers to play responsibly and really focused on consumer education. The second week is around legal regulated gaming and how it protects players. So, when we talk about the illegal marketplace, those operators, if we can call them that, they don't have any commitments to responsible gaming. They don't have any protections on problem gambling. They don't pay any taxes that go to fund those resources. They don't invest any of their own money or do any employee training. And so there's a real distinction around responsible gaming when it comes to the legal versus illegal market. And we wanted to highlight that. Our third week is about employees. They're the front lines of responsible gaming. And, we should invest day in and day out in, training and empowering them to be advocates in this space and to understand the role they play in building a healthy environment to keep betting fun. And then finally, closing the month out talking about the use of technology to advance responsible gaming. And that ranges from the conversations we're having in the US about the helpline and modernizing that effort and allowing more streamlined resource. But it also goes to technology to help people set limits and empower them to understand their play and create a responsible program for themselves.
Yeah, if I may pick out one of the important messages you just set out, I believe it's the one around empowering our staff and folks across the industry to become champions and ambassadors of the great laudable idea of responsible gambling, so that it trickles down and trickles through the wider public. And then, as you pointed out, even your stepfather, even my mum might figure out what it is that we actually do for living. So yeah, everybody please stay tuned. A lot to come between, today's recording and the end of the month when this episode is expected to air. I'm sure lots of great initiatives and really the industry stepping up its efforts even further. Well, we're hitting the home straight, and normally, and today will be no different. Before I give Cait the rather unenviable opportunity to have 60 seconds to convey her key messages, I would be really remiss. We've already talked about sports, so I would be remiss in my duties to sports fans out there. Well, it's not ESPN, perhaps one day. I would definitely be letting the podcast audience down if I didn't ask about your sport allegiances. I may be completely wrong here, but as a DC resident, I will ask about the DC team. So the Nationals not that great, but do you think that the Commanders with the new name will step up this season, and that the Capitals, led by the great number 8 OV, will rediscover their 2018 mojo? What's your take on the upcoming football and hockey seasons?
Well, DC is a sports town, and I'm definitely, number one, a Nationals fan. I had Teddy, they have the racing presidents at Nationals Park, and Teddy, the racing president, came to my wedding.
Awesome.
Committed fan of the Nationals. No, I'm excited for both the upcoming football season. The Commanders are actually one of our Have a Game Plan partners and have been leaders in that space. So I think they have some good momentum headed into this season with their rebrand and really being thoughtful about that. So excited to see what they deliver on the field. And then the Capitals, I don't know what's going to happen on the ice, but also another great Have a Game Plan partner. And we're excited to, they play literally out my window. So hopefully we'll get a few games in this season.
I hope you will. Well, we should wish both teams the best of luck. And now is your time to shine even more and cement your place in the Gambling Hall of Fame in the future. So your 60 seconds to deliver your key messages, ideally, of course, about gambling and responsible gambling.
Sure. I would take this time to really focus on the U.S. is an industry leader across the globe in responsibility, and just not in our leadership, but leaning into responsibility. We've seen it in our data. 9 in 10 past year sports bettors have seen at least one RG resource. They find they're hearing more about responsible gaming and the resources available, and how we want to create a sustainable environment. So it's incumbent on everyone to keep that going. That's, operators and suppliers in our industry understands that commitment. It's foundational to who we are and has been for decades. But it's also important for others in the space to understand their responsibility for responsibility and collaborate across, interests. We can always find commonalities to advance this and work together instead of working apart. Whether that's marketing and advertising or a broader dialogue on what the future of responsible gaming is, or what we've been doing with helpline modernization. There's room for collaboration, and the payoff comes in building a sustainable marketplace. And I would be remiss if I didn't put a plug in for Global Gaming Expo. G2E is coming up October 10th through 13th in Las Vegas, and we have a really fantastic slate of responsible gaming content and sessions to come and dialogue to be had. So hope to see you all there as we continue to elevate the conversation and push forward.
Amen to that. I should also say that Cait might be the very first guest who's by and large stuck to those 60 seconds. So well done. Thanks again for coming onto the show. It was a great pleasure and privilege to have you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Martin Lycka, and this was yet another episode of my Safe Bet Show. See you next time.